The dead of night on Highway 251 was usually Luke's sanctuary, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through miles of indifferent darkness, punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of his 18-wheeler and the hypnotic sweep of his headlights carving a path through the void. The night, however, felt different. An unshakable tension coiled in his gut, a low thrum of anxiety he couldn't quite place. He blamed it on the coffee, maybe the strange loading process earlier that day, anything but the premonition tightening its icy grip around his heart. He was hauling something. That was the extent of his knowledge, and it chafed. Luke wasn't just a wheelman. He was a professional. He knew manifests, bills of lading, the weight distribution of hazardous materials versus harmless consumer goods. He oversaw loading, ensuring his cargo was secure, balanced, known. But not today. Today had been sterilized. He'd arrived at the nondescript distribution center just after dawn, expecting the usual routine. Instead, he was met by a phalanx of tight-lipped men in crisp, matching uniforms, not the usual scuffed workwear of dock hands. They'd efficiently, almost clinically, waved him towards a sterile waiting room, taking his keys and paperwork with curt nods. "We'll handle the loading, Mr. Riley." "Standard procedure for this consignment," one had said, his eyes devoid of warmth. Standard procedure? Bull. Luke had hauled everything from poultry feed to sensitive electronics, and never had he been barred from overseeing his own rig's loading. He'd signed the papers, a stack thicker than usual, filled with jargon he barely skimmed, mostly just to get the process moving. Sitting in that bland office, nursing lukewarm coffee, the unease had first begun to fester. Now, hours later, alone on the dark highway, it had bloomed into full-blown suspicion. Wednesday evening bled into night. The mile markers blurred past. His destination was still hours away. He was cruising down a lonely stretch, a sidetrack branching off the main 251 artery, cocooned in the relative silence, the engine's growl a familiar lullaby. Then chaos erupted from the periphery. A flash of brown, a flicker of white tail, deer. Huge, panicked eyes locking with his headlights for a split second that stretched into eternity. It bolted directly into his path, a suicidal dash across the asphalt. Instinct, raw and primal, took over. Luke wrenched the wheel hard left, the tires screaming in protest. Every fiber of his being recoiled from the sickening thud of impact he desperately sought to avoid. He missed the deer. The fleeting image of the creature scrambling into the undergrowth was his last coherent thought before physics took brutal command. The massive weight of the trailer, unprepared for the violent maneuver, shifted catastrophically. A horrifying groan of tortured metal filled the cabin. The horizon tilted violently, the world spinning into a kaleidoscope of darkness and flashing dashboard lights. Time seemed to warp, slowing down the inevitable, agonizing second before the truck slammed onto its side with a deafening, earth-shattering crunch. Metal shrieked, glass imploded. Luke was thrown against his restraints, the air forced from his lungs. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the frantic ticking of the cooling engine and the drip, drip, drip of some unseen fluid. Pain flared along his shoulder and ribs, a dull ache throbbing in his skull. Disoriented, tasting blood and dust, he fumbled with the seatbelt release. It clicked open, and he half fell, half crawled out of the mangled driver's side window, collapsing onto the cool, unforgiving asphalt. He lay there for a moment, gasping, the world swimming back into focus. SARS wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to the carnage. Thank God the road was empty. This could have been so much worse, a fiery pileup involving innocent bystanders. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest. And then he saw it. It wasn't just that his truck was on its side, a wounded metal beast bleeding fluids onto the highway. The impact had been savage. The roof of the trailer had been partially ripped open, like a giant tin can pried back by an unseen hand. And its contents, oh God, its contents, were everywhere. Under the cold moonlight, the highway was transformed into an alien landscape. Thousands upon thousands of objects, roughly the size and shape of rugby balls or large oblong cantaloupes, lay scattered across both lanes and spilled deep into the grassy shoulder. They were a uniform, unsettling pattern of swirling blue and white. They pulsed faintly in his high beams, which still miraculously cut through the darkness from the wrecked cab. It looked like some bizarre, oversized game had been violently interrupted. What in God's name? Luke whispered, the words raspy in his throat. He staggered closer, ignoring the fire in his shoulder. This wasn't Produce. This wasn't sporting equipment. The sheer volume was staggering, covering an area easily 50 yards long. He reached down, his hand trembling slightly, and picked one up. It felt strange, cool to the touch, slightly yielding, like dense foam covered in a smooth, almost plasticky paper. It wasn't heavy, but it had substance. The blue and white pattern wasn't painted on. It seemed integral to the wrapping. He turned it over in his hands. No markings, no logos, nothing. Just the unnerving, repeating swirls. The memory of the sterile loading dock, the tight-lipped men, the unusual paperwork, it all crashed down on him with renewed force. This wasn't right. None of this was right. What the hell had they loaded into his truck? Driven by a sudden, desperate need for answers, Luke fumbled in his pocket for his utility knife. His hand shook as he tried to pierce the outer layer. It was tougher than it looked, resisting the blade initially, before yielding with a soft tearing sound. He started peeling back the blue and white wrapper, revealing another layer. Identical. He cut again, deeper this time. Another layer. It was like dissecting some bizarre industrial onion. What was inside that needed this much protection, or this much concealment? Just as he was about to pierce the third layer, a low growl intruded upon the night silence. Headlights. Distant but approaching fast. Relief warred with a fresh spike of anxiety. Help was coming, or was it? On this deserted stretch? At this hour? Fast-moving cars weren't unheard of, but the speed felt purposeful. The headlights grew rapidly, resolving into the distinct predatory gleam of a large black SUV. Tinted windows, reflecting the moonlight like obsidian pools, hid whoever was inside. It didn't slow gradually. It decelerated with aggressive precision, pulling up sharply beside the wrecked trailer, its engine idling with a menacing purr. Before Luke could fully process its arrival, the doors opened with quiet clicks. Figures emerged. Not paramedics, not state troopers in familiar uniforms. Men, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in identical, impeccably tailored dark suits. They moved with an unnerving synchronicity, fanning out slightly, their faces impassive, unreadable masks in the dim light. One stepped toward him. Luke felt a primal fear seize him, colder and sharper than the night air. These weren't rescuers. What's going on? Luke stammered, his voice barely a whisper. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Silence. The men just stood there, observing him, observing the wreckage, their eyes scanning the scene with chilling efficiency. They were like statues, radiating an aura of controlled power and absolute authority, an authority that had nothing to do with any police force Luke had ever encountered. Finally, the man closest to him spoke, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Sir, you need to step away from the vehicle. It wasn't a request, but my truck. We're securing the area. It's not safe." He took another step closer. Luke noticed the slight bulge under the man's jacket. This wasn't standard procedure. As if summoned by an unheard signal, more vehicles arrived. Headlights pierced the darkness from both directions. More black SUVs, identical to the first. Within minutes, Luke's overturned truck was the epicenter of a silent, menacing convergence. At least 10 vehicles, maybe more, disgorging a small army of dark-suited men. They moved with practiced, almost military discipline, establishing a perimeter, unfurling yellow tape that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Who are you people?" Luke demanded, trying to inject authority into his trembling voice. One of the men, perhaps the leader, slightly older, his face etched with sharp lines, stepped forward. He flashed a badge, quickly, almost dismissively. The glint of gold was brief, the details impossible to make out in the poor light. "Federal agents. This is a sensitive recovery operation. You need to clear the area immediately." "Federal agents? Here? For this? The blue and white balls?" It made no sense. "Please, sir, maintain a significant distance," another agent insisted, his tone polite but unyielding. They began gently but firmly guiding him further down the road, away from his truck, away from the spilled cargo they were already beginning to gather with focused intensity, using specialized scoop-like tools. "Do you have someone you can call? A ride?" the leader asked. "You cannot remain here. This is now a restricted zone." Luke's mind raced. The strangeness of the loading, the secrecy, these agents appearing out of nowhere like vultures circling a kill, the bizarre cargo, something was desperately wrong. He felt trapped, overwhelmed, but arguing seemed futile, possibly dangerous. Reluctantly, numbly, he pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling on the cracked screen. He called Stephen, his buddy, the only one close enough to bail him out at this ungodly hour. "Steve? Yeah, it's Luke. Look, I had an accident. Highway 251, the old sidetrack. Yeah, flip the rig. No, I'm okay, mostly. Just banged up. Listen, can you come get me? It's complicated. While Luke explained the situation in hushed, urgent tones, the agents continued their relentless work. They were pushing him further and further back. He watched, helpless, as they efficiently corralled the scattered blue and white balls, treating them with a strange mixture of urgency and care. By the time Stephen's beat-up sedan pulled up 20 minutes later, Luke was standing nearly 350 feet away from his truck, behind a newly erected, very official-looking yellow tape barrier. The scene behind the tape was a whirlwind of quiet, focused activity under portable floodlights that had materialized seemingly out of thin air. "Holy crap, Luke! What happened?" Stephen exclaimed, jumping out of his car, his eyes wide as he took in the distant, brightly lit chaos. "I don't know, man," Luke muttered, his gaze fixed on the strange operation unfolding down the road. "I just don't know. Let's get out of here, fast." As Stephen watched his friend, he saw the flicker of something else in Luke's eyes. Not just shock, but fear and cunning. Luke practically dove into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut. "Drive, Steve. Just drive. Get us away from here," Luke urged, his voice tight. Stephen put the car in gear, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror at the receding cordon of black SUVs and shadowy figures. "What was all that about? Those guys look serious. Feds?" Luke didn't answer immediately. He reached down beside his seat, his hand closing around something concealed near his feet. With a deep breath, he lifted it into the dim cabin light. A single blue and white ball. It had rolled further than the others, tumbling into a ditch just beyond the initial perimeter the agents had established, unnoticed in the initial confusion. While they were focused on the main spill and ushering him away, Luke had seen his chance. Split-second decision, fueled by suspicion and a desperate need for answers. He casually angled his body, nudged it with his foot further into the shadows, and then just before Stephen arrived, scooped it up under the cover of turning to greet his friend. It was a huge risk, but staying ignorant felt even more dangerous. "It rolled away," Luke explained, turning the strange object over in his hands. "They were too busy setting up their little blockade. I grabbed it." Stephen stared first at the ball, then at Luke, his expression shifting from concern to alarm. "Luke, are you crazy? Stealing from federal agents? What is that thing?" "I don't know," Luke admitted, his voice low. "But they wanted it back. Badly. And they didn't want me asking questions. That loading dock this morning, it was weird, Steve. They wouldn't let me near my own truck." He placed the ball carefully on the back seat. "We're going to find out what's going on, together." The drive back to Luke's small rented house was thick with tension. Stephen kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror, while Luke stared out the window, the strange ball burning a hole in his consciousness. Once inside, the familiar surroundings felt alien, tainted by the night's bizarre events. Luke walked straight to the kitchen, the adrenaline from the crash and the encounter finally starting to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep wariness and a gnawing anxiety. He placed the blue and white ball on the worn linoleum countertop. It looked even more out of place under the harsh fluorescent kitchen light. He grabbed the biggest, sharpest knife from the butcher block. The blade gleamed ominously. Stephen watched him, chewing on his lower lip. "You sure about this, man?" Stephen asked, his voice hushed. "Maybe we should just, I don't know, throw it away, forget about it, and let those guys keep whatever secret this is?" Luke countered, shaking his head. "No way. They acted like they owned the road, owned me. I need to know what I was hauling, what almost got me killed." He positioned the knife over the ball. "You gonna watch, or you gonna help?" Stephen hesitated, then sighed. All right, but if black helicopters descend on your house, I'm blaming you." Luke took a steadying breath and pressed the knife tip into the wrapping. This time, he sliced decisively. The blue and white paper peeled back, revealing another layer beneath. He sliced again and again. Layer after layer yielded, like shedding the skin of some strange fruit. The material felt cool, almost damp, the deeper he went. There was a faint, sterile, almost medicinal smell emanating from it now, barely perceptible. His hands, slick with nervous sweat, trembled slightly. After what felt like an eternity, perhaps 5 painstaking minutes of careful cutting and peeling, the final layer gave way. The wrapping fell aside, revealing the core. Both men froze. The air left the room. Nestled within the protective layers wasn't a bomb, or gold, or anything they could have easily comprehended. It was a cluster of tightly packed medical-grade syringes, dozens of them, gleaming under the light. Alongside them sat a vacuum-sealed plastic bag filled with small white unmarked pills. Stephen recoiled as if burned. Jesus Christ, Luke! Syringes? Pills? You were hauling drugs? Like Major League, cartel-level stuff? His face was pale, his eyes wide with horror. Luke stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the image before him with the federal agents who had secured the crash site. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickling down his temples. Drugs? Was that why the loading was so secretive? Why the men in suits descended so quickly, so professionally? It explained the secrecy, the paranoia, the sheer value implied by their reaction. But federal agents recovering illegal narcotics? It felt off. Too clean. Too organized. I had no idea, Luke stammered, the reality crashing down on him. He thought back to signing those papers, blindly trusting the process. If this was what he'd been carrying, he hadn't just been a driver. He'd been a mule. An unwitting pawn in a massive, dangerous game. If I'd known, Steve, I swear. We gotta call the cops, Luke, Stephen said, already reaching for his own phone. Right now, tell them what happened, what you found. No, wait. Luke grabbed Stephen's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Panic flared in his eyes. Think about it, Steve. Those guys on the highway, they said they were federal agents. They had badges. What if they are cops? Or some black ops unit? What if this whole thing, what if the cops are in on it? Stephen paused, the phone halfway to his ear. Luke's paranoia was infectious. You think? I don't know what to think. Luke ran a hand through his hair, agitated. But calling the official channels, if they're involved, or if those guys can intercept police calls, they'll know we have this. They'll know where we are. They cleaned up that crash site like it never happened. They could make us disappear just as easily. A chilling silence fell between them. The syringes and pills on the counter seemed to radiate a cold menace. They were trapped, holding evidence too dangerous to keep, too dangerous to report through normal means. So what do we do? Stephen whispered, looking utterly lost. Luke's eyes darted around the kitchen, searching for an anchor, an idea. His gaze fell on the coat he'd thrown over a chair when they came in. The transport papers, the damn papers he regretted signing. The papers, Luke breathed, a spark of desperate hope igniting within him. The transport documents. They have to list the destination address. Loading and unloading points for logistics, GPS tracking. It's always on there. He lunged for his coat, rummaging frantically through the pockets. His fingers closed around the folded sheaf of documents he'd barely glanced at that morning. Yes! Here! He smoothed the papers out on the counter, pushing the disturbing contents of the ball aside. His finger traced down the columns of logistical jargon until it landed on a specific line item. Destination, Unit 7B, Black Ridge Industrial Park, Sector 4. An address on the far outskirts of the city, an area known for aging warehouses and light industry. That's where it was supposed to go, Luke said, his voice tight with resolve. That's where they probably took the rest of the shipment after clearing the highway. Stephen looked at him, apprehension warring with grudging admiration. And what? We just drive over there? Knock on the door? Excuse me, are you the guys running a massive secret drug operation? Luke said, his eyes hardening. We go there, but we stay hidden. We watch. We get proof. Photos, video, anything that shows what's really going on. If we can't trust the cops, we need undeniable evidence to take to someone. Maybe the press, the FBI, a different division? I don't know. But we need leverage. We need to know who we're dealing with. It was a reckless plan, born of desperation, but it was the only plan they had. Stephen, caught up in Luke's desperate momentum and the sheer adrenaline of the situation, reluctantly agreed. They carefully repackaged the syringes and pills back into their multi-layered ball, evidence too vital to leave behind, too dangerous to carry loosely. Then, casting nervous glances out the windows, they slipped back out into the night, climbing into Stephen's unassuming sedan, heading towards Black Ridge Industrial Park in an unknown future. The drive across town was fraught with paranoia. Every pair of headlights in the rearview mirror felt like surveillance. Every unmarked van seemed menacing. They passed the crash site on Highway 251 again. As Luke had suspected, it was gone. Completely. No sign of the truck, no debris, not even skid marks on the pavement. It was as if the entire event had been meticulously erased from existence. The chilling efficiency sent a fresh wave of fear through Luke. Black Ridge Industrial Park emerged from the pre-dawn gloom, a sprawling complex of anonymous utilitarian buildings. Sector 4 was on the far edge, isolated, bordering a stretch of undeveloped woodland. They found Unit 7B, a large windowless warehouse, older than the others, with peeling paint and a neglected air. Yet, it showed subtle signs of high security, new-looking cameras mounted under the eaves, a reinforced steel door, and conspicuously, no company name or signage anywhere. And parked discreetly near a side-loading bay, shrouded partially by the building's shadow, was Luke's truck, or what was left of it. The trailer was battered, but seemingly repaired enough for transport. "They're here," Luke breathed, pointing. Nearby, two of the same black SUVs they'd seen on the highway were parked, and standing near the loading bay, overseeing something, were two figures in dark suits, the same men. "Okay, easy does it," Stephen whispered, parking the car down the street, partially obscured by a larger delivery truck parked overnight. "Now what, ace photographer?" "We watch," Luke said, grabbing his phone. "We get evidence." They crept closer on foot, using parked vehicles and overgrown bushes for cover. From a distance of about 50 yards, they had a clear view of the warehouse's main loading bay. Men in suits, along with others in unmarked gray jumpsuits, were carefully unloading more of the blue and white balls from Luke's damaged trailer, transferring them onto trolleys and wheeling them inside. The operation was swift, quiet, and incredibly organized. Suited men scanned the perimeter constantly, their gazes sharp and alert. Luke started snapping photos with his phone, zooming in as much as possible, capturing the balls, the men, the SUVs, his truck. The evidence was mounting, but the quality was poor from this distance. He needed to get closer. "Luke, don't," Stephen hissed, grabbing his arm. "It's too risky. We have pictures." "They're blurry," Luke whispered back, pulling his arm free. "I need clear shots. Faces. Something undeniable." Ignoring Stephen's frantic protests, Luke edged forward, darting from the cover of a dumpster to a stack of discarded pallets, then to a thick patch of weeds near the building itself. He was now maybe only 30 feet from the entrance, partially concealed by shadows and debris. He raised his phone again, focusing. Crack! His foot came down on a brittle piece of wooden crate hidden in the weeds. The sound, though not loud, shattered the pre-dawn stillness like a gunshot. Heads snapped up. The suited men near the loading bay froze, their hands instantly going inside their jackets. Their eyes scanned the darkness with lethal intensity. Luke knew, in that sickening instant, he'd pushed his luck too far. He tried to melt back into the shadows, but it was too late. Two figures detached themselves from the main group and moved toward his position with predatory speed and silence. Before Luke could even turn to run, rough hands seized him, spinning him around and slamming him against the cold brick wall. His phone clattered to the ground. Strong arms pinned him, expertly patting him down. Simultaneously, other figures emerged from the darkness, converging on Stephen's hiding place behind a nearby tree. "We got another one," a voice barked. They were caught, dragged unceremoniously toward the warehouse entrance. The heavy steel door hissed open, revealing a brightly lit, cavernous interior. Any hope Luke had clung to evaporated. Fear, cold and absolute, washed over him. They were dragged inside. The door sealed shut behind them with an ominous thud. They were shoved onto hard wooden chairs in a cleared area of the vast warehouse floor. Most of the space was empty, echoing and vast, but the corner they were in was different. It was sectioned off, brightly lit, filled with gleaming stainless steel tables, complex machinery humming quietly, computer monitors displaying intricate diagrams, and racks of glassware. It looked disconcertingly like a sophisticated laboratory. "We're sorry. We made a mistake. We didn't see anything," Stephen babbled, eyes wide with panic, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. The suited men ignored him, standing impassively, forming a silent, intimidating semicircle around them. Luke scanned their faces, hard, professional, unreadable. Then a different figure emerged from the lab area. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a white lab coat over a neat shirt and tie. He looked to be in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair, spectacles perched on his nose, and surprisingly calm, intelligent eyes. He regarded Luke and Stephen not with menace, but with a kind of weary curiosity. "Well, this is unexpected," the man said, his voice mild, carrying easily in the quiet space. He walked closer, stopping before them. "My name is Dr. David Larson. May I ask who you are, and why you were photographing my facility?" Unlike the guards, there was no overt threat in his demeanor. He seemed more like a preoccupied academic than a criminal mastermind. Luke, sensing a possible shift, decided honesty, or at least partial honesty, might be their only way out. Hiding the ball seemed pointless now. They'd likely found it during the pat-down. "I'm Luke Riley," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. That's my truck outside, the one that crashed." Dr. Larson raised an eyebrow. "Ah, the transport incident on 251. We were wondering about the driver. The initial report said you'd left the scene." Luke quickly explained everything. Crash, the strange cargo spill, the arrival of the agents being forced away, his suspicion, finding the stray ball, opening it with Stephen, the discovery of the syringes and pills, their fear, and their desperate attempt to find answers by coming here. He laid it all out, holding nothing back about their actions, emphasizing their confusion and fear. Stephen shot him panicked looks throughout the confession, clearly terrified Luke was sealing their doom. "Luke! Shut up! What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. Dr. Larson held up a hand to silence Stephen. He listened patiently to Luke's entire story, his expression thoughtful. When Luke finished, the doctor sighed softly. "I understand your confusion and fear," Larson said calmly. "And your actions, while reckless, were perhaps understandable under the circumstances. Secrecy surrounding these shipments is absolute, for reasons that will become clear." He paused, looking directly at Luke. "You retrieved one of the units, didn't you? The object you found inside?" Luke hesitated, then nodded slowly. One of the guards stepped forward, placing the rewrapped blue and white ball, along with Luke's phone, on a nearby metal table. Dr. Larson picked up the ball. "You opened this?" Luke nodded again. "And you assumed narcotics?" "What else could we think?" Luke asked, gesturing toward the ball. "Syringes, pills, unmarked, secret transport, guys in suits acting like spooks." Dr. Larson actually chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Partially right, Mr. Riley, in a way. These are drug-related components, extremely valuable ones, but they are not illegal. Quite the opposite." He carefully began to unwrap the ball again, his movements practiced and precise. He laid the syringes and the bag of pills on the table beside it. The clinking sound echoed slightly. "Look closer," Dr. Larson invited. "These aren't street drugs. These are highly specialized, synthesized precursor chemicals and specifically engineered delivery mechanisms." He gestured around the lab area. "I am a biochemist, Mr. Riley. My team and I work under a government contract, a highly classified one. We are developing next-generation pharmaceuticals, treatments for aggressive cancers, neurological disorders, extremely resilient viral strains, illnesses that currently have limited or no effective cures." Luke and Stephen stared, dumbfounded. "Government contract? New medicines?" "The components required for these medicines are incredibly complex to synthesize," Dr. Larson continued, his voice taking on an edge of passion. "And unbelievably expensive. A single one of these balls, as you call them, we call them delivery modules, contains ingredients worth, conservatively, over $10,000. Luke's jaw dropped. $10,000? In that little ball? "Precisely," Dr. Larson affirmed, seeing his reaction. "Which is why the secrecy. This project, if revealed prematurely, or if these components fell into the wrong hands, the black market value would be astronomical. Industrial espionage, terrorist acquisition, the threats are very real. That's why we use unmarked trucks, drivers kept intentionally unaware of the cargo's true nature. Plausible deniability, reduced risk. The unusual wrapping is designed to look innocuous, like discarded beach toys, or something equally worthless if a spill occurs. The men you encountered," he gestured to the stoic guards, "are a specialized federal security detail assigned to protect this project and its assets." It all clicked into place, a bizarre, high-stakes explanation that was somehow more believable than a simple drug ring. Secrecy, the expense, the agents, the rapid cleanup, it was all about protection. "So, you're not criminals?" Stephen asked, sounding immensely relieved. "Far from it," Dr. Larson said with a faint smile. "We're trying to save lives, but secrecy is paramount to ensure we can." He looked back at Luke. "Which brings us to you, Mr. Riley. You've seen behind the curtain. You know what we're doing, what you were transporting, and frankly, your initiative in retrieving that module, while unauthorized, shows a certain resourcefulness." He paused, studying Luke intently. "Normally, discovering this operation would require extensive debriefing and non-disclosure agreements under penalty of severe federal charges. However, your situation presents a unique opportunity." Luke tensed. "Opportunity?" "We need reliable transport," Dr. Larson stated. Drivers who understand the sensitivity, who can be trusted implicitly. Your previous employer clears drivers for various contracts, including ours, but always at arm's length, without knowledge of the specifics. But now, you know, you've proven you can handle pressure, even if your methods were unorthodox. He leaned forward slightly. Mr. Riley, how would you feel about working directly for this project, as a dedicated, vetted transporter? Higher security clearance, significantly better compensation than standard freight hauling, and the knowledge that you are contributing to something potentially world-changing. Of course, it would demand absolute discretion. You would answer only to us. You would cease all other transport work. Luke was stunned. A job offer? Working for a secret government medicine project? It was surreal. He owned his truck. He was an independent contractor, taking jobs from various brokers and companies. Focusing on just one, especially one this significant, was entirely possible, and infinitely more interesting than hauling chicken feed. He looked at the lab equipment, thought about the life-saving potential Dr. Larson described. And my friend? Luke asked, glancing at Stephen. Your friend, Dr. Larson said, turning his calm gaze on Stephen, will need to sign a formidable non-disclosure agreement, one that carries severe consequences if breached. But provided he understands the gravity of the situation and maintains absolute silence, he may walk away from this tonight. Stephen nodded vigorously, looking immensely grateful just to be breathing. Silent as a tomb, Doc. You got it. Never saw a thing. Luke looked back at Dr. Larson. The crash, the fear, the confusion, it had led him here, to this unbelievable crossroads. A secret world hidden beneath the mundane surface of highway transport. It was dangerous, yes, but it felt important. Okay, Luke said, meeting the doctor's gaze. I'm in. Where do I sign? A small smile touched Dr. Larson's lips. Excellent. We have some paperwork, Mr. Riley. Quite a bit, actually. From that night on, Luke Riley's life changed irrevocably. He was no longer just a trucker hauling anonymous freight. He became a ghost, transporting priceless, life-altering medical components across the country in his repaired rig, operating under layers of secrecy, a crucial cog in a machine working to push the boundaries of medicine. The open road still called, but now the darkness held not just miles, but secrets. Vital, dangerous, $10,000 secrets, disguised as harmless balls of blue and white. And Luke, he drove on, a knowing guardian of the payload. End note. If you found Luke's unexpected plunge into a world of high-stakes secrets and hidden science thrilling, imagine the other stories lurking just beneath the surface of the everyday. For more narratives that peel back the ordinary to reveal the extraordinary, the kind of mind-bending twists and captivating tales that keep you guessing, you know where to look. Keep your eyes peeled for enigmatic, where the next unbelievable story is always waiting to unfold.